Ed Luce and Marc are still with us. It has been remarkable what has happened, Ed, in the last 5 years. There has been so much economic turmoil between the pandemic and then Donald Trump coming back into office. Supply chains have been disrupted, this trade war. So much has happened, and yet we still seem to be doing okay. How do you account for that?
That's true. I mean, look, there was a ton of stimulus put into the U.S. economy, late pandemic and really in early post-pandemic, that has been helped juicing up U.S. consumer spending for most of the intervening time. But also, let's face it, America is the most innovative economy in the world. And whilst the cost of borrowing has gone up, it's also gone up everywhere else. And it's still not as high as you might imagine it would have been when we saw higher inflation numbers a few years ago. But there is no doubt we're moving into a different phase now. Businesses loathe uncertainty. And going through the various scenarios from 10% tariffs to 140% tariffs on China, decoupling as opposed to just de-risking, whether there is going to be an end to the Ukraine war or Trump's just going to walk away. And the Ukraine war is another big, when Russia invaded, supply shock to the world economy. There is just a period of real dampening animal spirits because people need to plan on the basis of some certainty. And with Trump, you don't get predictability.
There is all this uncertainty, and there was, of course, during the pandemic for obvious reasons. There's now all this uncertainty, as you just laid out with Donald Trump, and the whiplash on his trade decisions. There's one piece of it, though, that I keep coming back to. We discussed it for a second, but I want to go back to it again. That is the national debt. Couple all of this uncertainty, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future with Donald Trump and what he's going to decide, and the fact that we've now put ourselves in a position of not being trusted by our friends and allies. Does that make the debt an even more important factor going forward, Ed?
I think it's critically important. I'm originally from Britain, and you might remember that. Yeah, I know it's. I get confused for somebody from Alabama sometimes, but not often. And Liz Truss was our shortest-lived ever prime minister 3 years ago, because she had a sort of magical thinking that unfunded tax cuts would pay for themselves with higher growth, and that became known. The impact on the cost of British borrowing, government borrowing, debt, became known as the moron premium. It added to the cost of borrowing, and we're beginning to see a moron premium creep into U.S. Treasury yields, which is a sign that the world wants to be paid more of a risk premium for the risk of holding American government sovereign debt. And that is not a good thing. This is one of the sort of great privileges of having the world's reserve currency, is you can borrow cheaply and you do have much quicker, you are the safest asset in the world. And now there is a real nagging question mark over the safety and the full faith and credit of U.S. sovereign debt. And again, sorry to repeat myself, but that is a Trump factor.
Well, I come back to that as well. I keep thinking about the debt more than I ever thought I would think about the national debt, yet here I am. Marc, how do you see this moment? Are you feeling stable? Are you feeling unstable?
Well, look, I still think America is the strongest economy in the world, but I do think that we are not being honest with the American people when we have $36 trillion in debt. And all candor about Congressman Rose, he's not being honest when he says that's not the driver here. For the first time in American history, if you add up Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the interest on the debt, it is more than the revenue we bring in before we even get to discretionary spending. So, yeah, we talk about DOGE cuts and how insignificant they are. That's true, because we're not talking about the real drivers of our debt. And neither party is being honest about addressing it. And I think that compounding that structure.
Do you think that adding, I understand that Republicans don't want to ever raise taxes, but there are people in this country that make a whole lot of money, and you could raise taxes just on a few people, relatively speaking, and save taxes for everybody else and bring in a whole lot of revenue. You could raise taxes on corporations just by a little bit and save other people a whole lot of money. I mean, I understand the desire to reform entitlements. I get it. But how do you just do that and not do the other thing, which is tax the billionaires? I mean, we've seen a historic rise in the number of billionaires in this country alone in the past few years.
Well, I mean, Katy, we could tax people in limited amounts and have enormous entitlement programs.
Why not do both? Why not do both? Why not reform entitlements and cut tax and raise taxes?
Because I think the reality is that the people who are the biggest job creators are the ones that actually are the highest earners, Katy. And the reality is what we've seen. They often
just buy back their own stock.
Come on. That's not true. What we've seen is that actually when you reduce the corporate rate from 35% where it was prior to 2017, it was higher than communist China, lowered to 21%. It's the median of developed countries. You brought jobs back because countries are no longer incented to move their companies overseas. That policy worked. It worked to create more jobs. It worked to create more people paying into the system. You had more taxpayers than ever before.
I don't understand that. I mean, I'm out of time. But I understand not wanting to raise taxes. I understand not wanting to cut entitlements. I understand that both those things, the positions that Democrats and Republicans have in Congress on them, means that nothing gets done. Or it gets done for a second, then gets rolled back every few years. There is a big and vast middle ground that could be mined if there were another political party. Marc Short, Ed Luce, thank you guys very much.